Greetings to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Shexa's YouTube channel. If you are new to this channel, please be encouraged to subscribe so that you don't miss out on this series of videos. We are going to upload a lot of videos. I think there will be 3, if not 4. I will try to be fast so that they don't spend much time and don't spend much time on these videos. Subscribe, like, comment so that we improve and we understand if we are communicating with you guys. All right, so I hope you have seen the introductory video about this series. So this is video tutorial number 1 for revision. So I will start with a case. The moment you get a case like this, you may have 2 ballpoints or even 3. Avoid using a red pen in this case. Of pen or pencil or all those writing objects or items should be of different colors, or you may have some highlighters. But this is not mandatory for you, but it's just something that is helping you in understanding the cases. So this is it. Suppose you have a relational database called DB clothing cells with the following tables. The moment you get to DB clothing cells, you know that this is a database object. This is a database object. So when you think, or whenever you see that or observe that we have a database object, then you must remember that database objects are manipulated by data definition language. So data definition language consists of the create, drop, use, and many other commands. So when we are dealing with database objects, mostly we work with the data definition language. So the database objects mostly are the database objects mostly are the database containers. The database itself is a container of database tables. Database table is a container of database rows, and views, they are more like tables, virtual tables, and many other objects that we may look at. So this is a database object. Then as you are reading the case, you'll be underlining things, circulating things, and then doing many other things, writing some few notes on your paper. But here, I will be answering the questions. But when I'm answering the questions, I may say some other things that are not answering the questions, but helping you in understanding what we are doing, and also answering questions that are not asked in this case. Because we are doing a revision, we just don't go straight only to this question, but we talk a lot about many other things surrounding what we have in the case, so that when you get when you face something that is different from what we have seen, you might have some knowledge, because we have you got a chance of us touching around it. So we have these objects, T color is our table, T customer, T category, T clothing order. These are our database tables, and they have their respective attributes. Now, for us to make sure that our containers contain high quality data, we have to enforce entity integrity. So entity integrity is just there to make sure that all our records can be uniquely identified. It's making sure that we can uniquely identify all instances of each entity. Right. So for instance, we have T color. Under T color, we may use color ID to uniquely identify each color. Therefore, color ID is our primary key, which is enforcing entity integrity. So entity integrity is enforced by a primary key mainly. However, every column that is unique, or every column that is a unique constraint, can possibly be used as a primary key, or can possibly be used to enforce entity integrity. So a candidate key can enforce entity integrity. Alternate key can enforce entity integrity. So if we choose, for instance, let's say on T customer, we have customer ID, first name, national ID, date of birth, date captured. Customer ID can be used alone as a primary key because it can uniquely identify every customer. National ID is also a candidate key. It can also be used as a primary key. So at this moment, these two attributes are candidate keys because we haven't chosen one, but we are yet to choose. So at this moment, customer ID and national ID are candidate keys. The moment we choose to say we want to use customer ID as our primary key, then national ID becomes an alternate key. If we choose national ID as a primary key, then customer ID becomes our alternate key. If we choose both as our primary key, making a composite key, then it means we are left with no alternate key which stands on its own. We may have a combination of keys to formulate a composite key which might act as an alternate key. Now, for us to make sure that all our tables enforces entity integrity, we select primary keys. So in this case, I've talked about T customer, having customer ID as a primary key, but I'm going to create a table that has got customer ID as a primary key alone, and then combine, create another table, create the same table with customer ID and national ID as a composite primary key. So I will just be showing you two ways of doing it, but you are not supposed to do it the way I'm doing it right now, of creating the same table two ways. I'm just showing you two ways of doing things. Right, I'm saying this because some of you, when they see things, they just say, this guy was doing it this way, so we have also to do it the way he was doing it. So make sure that you understand what I'm saying. The most challenging thing is people are watching these videos without listening to what I'm saying. So what they end up doing is they end up doing what I was doing, not knowing why I was doing it, not knowing the reason behind. So on entity integrity, we've enforced the quality of our data by enforcing entity integrity. Now, you can see that color ID is a column that is used as a primary key in T color. Therefore, this is enforcing referential integrity because this is referencing to T color. So foreign key is mainly enforced by a foreign key. And a foreign key can be a primary key in its primary table, or can be any attribute that is unique. By unique, I mean any column that has got a unique constraint. So every table that has got every column that has got a unique constraint can be used in a foreign table to enforce referential integrity. So here we have current category ID, customer ID, clothing ID. So all these tables are used, all these attributes are used to enforce referential integrity. Therefore, what does it mean when we have foreign keys like this? What it means is T clothing depends on two tables which are T color and T category. T clothing depends on T customer and T clothing. Right? Therefore, what do we what does that imply? This implies that we cannot create T clothing without T color table in existence, without T category in existence. Therefore, it's a must, we must have created T color and T category. Therefore, if you are asked to write an SQL statement to create T clothing, the question is asking you to create only T clothing, of which T clothing depends on T color and T category. So what are you going to do? You are going to write in your footnotes that I am creating T clothing, assuming that T color table and T category table has been created already or are in existence already. That's your assumption. Some of you, they start to create T color, they create T category, then they create T clothing, which is a wastage of time and resources. So when you have all the time, you can do that. But because you may not have enough time, I encourage you to make use of the footnotes to write the assumption. Same applies to T clothing order. T clothing order depends on customer ID. T clothing order depends on clothing ID. T clothing rather. T clothing depends on T customer. T clothing depends on T clothing. Let me start again. T clothing order depends on T customer. T clothing order depends on T clothing. Therefore, T clothing order must be created after creating T customer and T clothing. So this is referential integrity. So referential integrity, it helps you to see which sequence should I follow in creating my tables. It shows you the sequence that you're supposed to follow. So as you have the case, you'll be writing, highlighting with your highlighter and with your pen and the pencil before you start answering the questions. Now, does T color depend on any other table? No. Therefore, I can start by creating T colors. So I'm giving them labels now. So T color, I'm giving it label 1. T customer, because T customer does not depend on any other table, I'm also giving it a label 1 because I can start by creating T customer. T category, I can also start by it because it doesn't depend on anything. Right, so the thing is, I haven't read the question yet. So I'm saying if I'm asked to create T category, it means I can only start it. I can only start by writing the query without doing any other thing that is mandatory. Then T clothing. Since T clothing depends on color, T color and T category, then what I'm going to do is I will write an assumption. Assuming that T category and T color tables have been created already in the database DB clothing cells, I then write the following SQL statement to create T clothing. Then you write the SQL query statement to create T clothing, enforcing referential integrity by putting foreign key which references the table in the column. So I'm going to put a 4 there. If you want, you can put T on T clothing. Why? Because it depends only on 2 tables, because we have T color and T category. So you may say T color is 1, T category is another 1, then T clothing becomes 3. But because we are just doing a revision, I am going to create all the tables, and then when I create all the tables, this T clothing becomes my 4th table to be created. Then T clothing order comes after T customer and T clothing. Therefore, I'm going to give it 5 because it's going to be the 5th table to be created. Then we talk about domain integrity. Domain integrity is enforced by data types, constraints, and the rules. Domain integrity is all about acceptable values for each and every attribute that we have in our database. This ensures that business rules are followed. This ensures that we don't come across errors when we are putting values. When you are asked about your name, what's your name? And you say 5. 5 could be your name, but it's a number. Then what's the price of this? And you say your name. What's the price of sugar? And you say Martin. It doesn't mean anything. So you have to make sure that each and every attribute has got meaningful and acceptable values. So on quantity, we may have integer, but we may have some values on quantity that require a decimal comma. For instance, if we are talking about packets of biscuits, you may say 1.5 packets. If we're talking about quantity in terms of number of items, like in this case we have clothing, I don't think there is a case where we can say we have 1.5 clothing. 1.5 clothes. I've got 1.5 clothes. The half, I don't think it exists in this case. If you have a case where a half exists, then you can determine the data type you may use. So for me, I will choose to use an integer which acts as a whole number or just a number. Then for order date, I will make sure that I receive a date. For T clothing name, I will choose a variable character. So this is enforcing domain integrity. We've talked about referential integrity. We've talked about entity integrity. So why have I done this? I haven't started answering any question, but the thing is, I am withdrawing my thoughts onto this paper so that I remember, or I just come here. I no longer have to think when I'm asked about something. If I'm asked about domain integrity, I already have examples coming from the case. When I'm asked about entity integrity, I now have examples coming from the case. When asked about referential integrity, everything is now laid down. So what's the next step? The next step is now answering this question. And the question reads, write SQL statements to create the tables below. And the tables are T clothing order, T customer. These are the only tables you are asked to create. So you will have to write SQL statements to create only these 3 statements. But now look, the footnotes that you are supposed to include they are only about table creation sequence, nothing else. That's why I left only these numbers on this paper. So if you are writing with green, considering the order of creating tables, then your eyes will only focus on the green. But in this case, we have black and white. So that's where we are looking at right now. The boxes that has got numbers in white, the boxes with black color. So T clothing is number 4. T clothing order is number 5. T customer is that. So T clothing, I will create it after creating T color and T category. So in your footnotes, you are now specifying this. For instance, this is a case. The order of table creation is 1. Table customer, 2. T color, 3. T category, T clothing, and lastly T clothing order. Hence, the assumption is that T color and T category are created already. This is the footnote for T clothing. T clothing order depends on T customer and T clothing. Therefore, I assume that T clothing and T customer have been created already. Then you write your SQL statement to create T clothing order. Then T customer does not depend on anything. Therefore, you just write the query to create T customer. Right. So this is how you write your footnotes. Here I just gave you a highlight to say the assumption is that T color and T category are created already for me to create T clothing. For me to create T clothing order, I must have created T customer and T clothing. First of all, then you start to create your 3 tables, only the tables that you are asked to create. Right, so let's stop here for this first video so that the videos don't be that long. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share as you wait for a second video that is coming in a few minutes, if not few hours. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.